menu and like it's hello everyone, welcome to the Cups workshop. This is a 2-hour class where we're going to explore all of the cards in the Cups suit, and I'm excited to be with y'all. Let's go ahead and dive in. The cups, as you may well know, are reflective of our emotional experience, the heart space, which is what we metaphorically connect to our emotional world. The heart chakra is the one we associate with our emotional experience. Emotions drive and shape our entire lives, even as much as we try to suppress them, and even as much as this world wants us to suppress them, they are there shaping our experience. It's really magical. We're one of, not every creature on this planet has emotions. So we get to have that experience, and the cups all reflect what that can look like. So, in case this is your first time learning from me or hearing from me, I'm Cecily Saylor. I'll be your guide tonight. I am a creative coach, a tarot reader, I'm a writer. My mission in life is to support creative people and help them harness, heal, and honor their creative gifts so that you can create with more freedom, joy, and pleasure, and just make really cool shit in the world and have a lot of fun doing it. Sounds simple, but if you try to create things, you know that sometimes your mind and other things will get in your way. So as a coach, I help people sort through that. I use tarot a lot to support this. I also use other methods like dream analysis, other kinds of witchy and woo things to help us go into our subconscious, our unconscious space, and figure out what is impacting our brains and our actions. To start, I just want to invite us all to connect with this element, water. Here's a beautiful photo of a waterfall. I invite everyone to close your eyes for just a moment. Settle into your seat, settle into your body. Just take a few grounding breaths to leave behind the day that we've experienced and arrive here in this space. Just take a moment to kind of scan your body, become aware of your physical form and any emotions that may be showing up there. We understand emotions, they're really just sensations in the body. So just scan the body, looking for sensations, feelings. Letting your breath lengthen. Let's take one deep inhale together, inviting fresh, excited, delighted energy into the body, and then releasing with an exhale anything that you do not need right at this moment. Let's do that twice more, taking a big inhale and exhale. Once more, an inhale and an exhale to release whatever you do not need right now. If I haven't said it already, and I think I have, I'm very glad to be with you. I love exploring tarot, especially with friends. So just to let you know before we get into the content for this class, as you can tell already, the class is being recorded. It will be shared. Everyone who signed up is getting a recording. We're going to go through each of the cups cards in the suit. That's 14 cards. I'll be sharing with you a composite of different meanings that I've assimilated in my tarot journey. So some of that is stuff I read in books. Some of it is things I heard in podcasts. A lot of it also is intuitive meanings that I arrived at on my own through my lived experience and through reading tarot for a lot of people and hearing about their situations and seeing the cards come up in response to situations they're living through. And so this is kind of a composite, but there's also a lot of material in this class to help you do the very same thing and figure out what your own meanings or your kind of like menu of meanings for each card might contain. There's also no one fixed meaning for every card. It's up to the tarot reader to interpret. And the more you work with tarot, the more you'll find that a card is kind of like a gem, like it has many facets. And so sometimes it may be showing you this one angle, and then in another reading, it will show you something a little bit different, but you also begin to see how those different facets belong to the same kind of archetype. It's going to be a lot of information, so don't freak out. You have plenty of time to digest this, especially with the journaling prompts that allow you to really connect with the meanings that seem important to you and personalize the meanings. That's where some of the deepest work can probably happen. There's 14 journaling prompts, so don't try to do them on 14 consecutive days unless you're like really hell-bent on doing that. But give yourself time to absorb and digest the information. If you get overwhelmed, just mute me for a second. It's in the recording. Take a couple deep breaths. Come back when you're ready. Anything I offer that doesn't work for you, just ignore it. In addition to the journaling prompts, you'll have meditation that you can use that will guide you through the full journey of the suit from the ace to the king. So that's another way that you get to experience some of the meanings and the energies, is by kind of moving through them in an internally curated way. As I mentioned earlier, I'll invite y'all periodically to share some of your interpretations of the cards. You actually don't have to wait for my invitation. You can put them in the chat whenever you want. Feel free to drop questions as well. I may wait a moment before I get to your question and finish what I'm saying, but I welcome your input. And as I said, yes, take your time. There's a lot of info. All right. So, as I said before, the cups are concerned with our emotions, our feelings, and the heart. Each of the suits is connected to a different aspect of our experience, and the cups, which provide a container that holds the element of water, this is what we associate with feeling. So in addition to each of the symbols having a connection, they're also connected to an element, as I mentioned, water for the cups. And archetypally, metaphorically, water has long been a symbol of our emotional and intuitive experience. So just like our emotions, water is always moving and shifting. Of course, we can get in a certain kind of emotional state like depression that stays around for a really long time. But generally speaking, our emotions are much like water. They move through us and out of us. New ones come and replace the ones that were there before. And our bodies, our spirits, our souls kind of function as a container for these feelings. And all of those feelings can contain data and information that we can use to guide our life. We live in a society and in a world where like leading with your emotions is not encouraged. More and more, like in schools, you hear about social and emotional learning, where children are given skills and practices to find some emotional awareness, develop their own emotional coping mechanisms and things like that. But there are so many places where certain kinds of emotion are frowned upon. So we live in a world where we're typically taught to like suppress, contain, not really express fully the feelings that we feel. And so a lot of our work in life as we get older, if we decide to take it up, is understanding, what am I feeling? Do I need to suppress this? Usually no. How can I get curious about this emotion? And what might I find when I do get curious that can help me make a decision or figure out what I need right now, or soothe myself in some way? In the course of this journey, I've kind of borrowed from a few different decks to show you the images. So predominantly like these cards and these down here. This is the Modern Witch Tarot, which is a really has a lot of fidelity to the Smith Rider Waite, which you'll see here in the Four of Cups, the Page of Cups, the Knight, the Queen. So there's primarily two decks, the Smith Rider Waite and the Modern Witch. They look very similar, but one has been updated, one is more feminine. And then this last card you'll see is from the Pagan Otherworlds deck. And I really love this representation of the king, which I'll talk about later. So that's why that card is there. All right. So the energy of the cups opens. You can imagine if for those who may live in Texas or Austin like me, we have been getting a little bit of rain this week, like just a little bit, but right away it's so hot. The the rain is gone. The ground does not stay wet. So it's kind of like the opening of this suit is sort of like living in this moment in August when it's really hot and like, oh my gosh, it's raining. There's refreshment, there's nourishment, there's this soothing, replenishing, revitalizing quality. Of course, water is like the secret to life on earth. One of the reasons that we believe or know, actually, it's not a belief. We know life is here on earth because water is here, and a lot of life and a lot of we can trace like so many life forms back to the kind of soupy, watery origins. And so, metaphorically speaking, with like water and emotions, this too is like very original and very much a part of what makes us human. Can also imagine a tide rising and the heart beginning to open. So start with the Ace of Cups, which shows this hand reaching out with a cup that is spilling over with water into this beautiful pond. This representation has a heart sitting over the cup, which is certainly very appropriate to the whole emphasis of the suit. And the question that I most associate with this card is what can revive and refresh the heart? So often when I see this card, I'm inclined to think that maybe the heart or emotionally, we've been kind of fasting or deprived, or there's been some kind of lack of connection, of joy. And Ace of Cups starts to bring the water back to the parched landscape of the heart. Another way I talk about this card, especially with people who live in Austin, anyone who's been to Barton Springs, it's a spring-fed pool. Sometimes I write about it in emails. I feel like it's one of the best things in this city. It's a spring-fed pool. It's an eighth of a mile long. There's a grassy hill next to it. The water is 68 degrees all the time. So when summer comes and it's super, super hot here, going to Barton Springs is a very special treat. And jumping in that water will wake your ass up. You will come back alive again. And I feel like Ace of Cups is similar to that experience of jumping into Barton Springs on a really hot day. So the heart begins to open again, kind of like a withered bloom that receives water and it starts to perk up. This can also represent a renewal of love and appreciation for yourself or someone else. Sometimes people will read this as like a new love card, like a relationship is coming for you, something like that. The way that I read tarot is a lot more inwardly focused, like what are you cultivating inside yourself that might impact your external experiences, rather than like, oh, fate is bringing you a new exciting romantic interest. Though sometimes I will see it that way. And this can also be like a new path for emotional healing. So as the heart starts to come alive again, there's information we can use to kind of look back and see, where did we get off track? What are we needing? What are we wanting? The Two of Cups brings two cups together. And here we see two figures facing one another. Typically, or in the Smith Rider-Waite deck, their cups are perfectly equal, like they're at the very same level. They're heart to heart, they're face to face, chest to chest. And so I really talk about this card as a representation of the most dignified relationship we might be able to experience, like really high level of high dignity relationship. So the questions I have for this one: how can we honor the integrity and autonomy of the self while in relationship? Or how can we love ourselves better? So sometimes I'll read this card as like, you, the person I'm reading for, maybe is in a relationship with someone, and there's an opportunity to up level the relationship and really get clear on, how are we doing this? How do we best serve and honor each other in this relationship without bringing a lot of expectations onto one another? Sometimes I will read this card as though both figures in the card are actually you. So this is you coming into contact with yourself and bringing a new kind of love and appreciation for your being into your awareness and into your experience. We also have the winged lion and this caduceus, the two intertwining snakes, which we also see in medical symbology, right? So that is a symbol of healing. And as one of my very important therapists taught me, the best, deepest healing happens in relationship. So, especially a healthy one. A lot of times when we get in relationship, we, depending on like what we have not healed yet, we might be bringing a lot of codependency and really kind of giving up parts of the self in order to satisfy the needs of the other, or getting into a kind of transactional relationship where unmet needs, the relationship really functions to service unmet needs rather than a kind of wholly formed person who's like in possession of themselves comes into relationship with another wholly formed person in full possession of themselves, and they say, I really dig you, you're super cool, I would love to hang out with you more, but I'm not trying to possess you, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, you're your own person, I respect that, you can be an independent being and I'll be one too, but we can have a lot of beautiful fun together, we can have a lot of intimacy together. That's a really healthy relationship where everyone gets to be themselves and experience the benefits of intimacy. So that's what I mean by dignified or a right relationship. This is a meeting of equals, meeting yourself with love. So in that situation, you might be feeling more like, you know what, I'm really hard on myself for little bitty things that like I would never bring this scrutiny to a child or to my best friend. So I'm going to start practicing a different way of talking to myself, one that has a lot more grace in it. It's like, oh, I'm really, you know what, Cecily, you really are feeling gloomy today. It must be confusing that you don't know why, but I'm sure this feeling will pass. It's okay to have this feeling. You're a wonderful, amazing person. So really talking to yourself like a loving other. And also starting to see yourself more clearly and accept yourself more fully. So let's look at Three of Cups, which has got some Two of Cups vibes, but just with another person. It's not that simple, but in a way it is. This card, we can ask the questions: where do we find emotional support from others? Are we able to actually receive that support? And what can we grow with love together? So often I will really emphasize feminine and female relationships, or relationships with a lot of women or femme identifying people in them. But we all have feminine and masculine qualities, and this card is not exclusively for women or femme identifying people. However, it does cultivate some of the, or it does call out or bring up some of the qualities that we typically associate with the feminine um, aspect. So, emotional connection, nurturing, the kinds of things that can be grown and blooming from emotional connection. In the journaling prompts, this will age me, or I mean, I'm not afraid to tell you my age, but this will show you a little bit. How many of you have seen Steel Magnolias with Dolly Parton, Shirley MacLaine, Sally Field, um, Julia Roberts, a young Julia Roberts? In this movie, there's a lot of Three of Cups vibes where the women are like hanging out in the hair salon. Okay, yeah. So a couple people have seen it. Alessandra, you would really like it, I think. Um, and they're like hanging on the hair salon. They're getting stuff ready for a wedding. They're like making food for people. There's a lot of like just communal aspects. They have really strong friendships. They're really straight with one another, and they're very supportive of one another all the time, even if they're bickering. So, yes, it's a great film. Highly recommend. 1989. That's when it came out. So, with this card, if this shows up, I really want to start encouraging people or asking them, like, where's your community? What kind of support are you getting? Who do you get to create with? And I don't just mean like make art, I also mean create food, create belonging, create nourishment. In the Smith Rider Waite deck, at the feet of these women, there's a like pumpkin harvest. And so the suggestion is that together, collectively, this group has harvested like food and nourishment for not just themselves, but also for others. This depiction looks like maybe they're outside a music festival or Burning Man or something like that. Burning Man is a very like communal oriented kind of place where it's like come as you are, trade and barter. I haven't been, but that's what I hear. So emotionally supportive friendships, leaning into like your highest community, your best pals and friends and family members, harvesting together through fellowship. So if you were part of a church and you had a food bank and people came together to donate and sort food and provide food for the community, that would be very Three of Cups. Also, an important part of this is like, are you able to receive? So especially women and femme identifying people or people who grew up in female bodies, we are really trained to people please and also to focus on the needs of others at the expense of our own. So when it comes time to be the person in need or be the person who needs support, our nervous system is like, what? When someone's like, hey, let me bring you some food, let me like run that errand for you, we're like, oh, I can't possibly like put you out, no, like please. And support and community are like two-way, three-way, six-way streets, whatever. We can't just give all the time. We need to also learn how to receive the support that people want to offer us. So instead of like clenching up and hiding and being like, I'm fine, I don't need anything. It's like, how can I relax? How can I feel the support of these relationships and these people who truly love me and want me to be okay? Okay, so every few cards, I'm gonna take a break, check in. How are y'all feeling about these cards? Any questions that you have? Any stories, meanings, or connections that you would like to share? Would you say the cup suits are focused more on relationships than others? It's a good question. I think a little bit, yes. Um, that said, so our way of relating to people and building relationships is emotional. We feel something for someone: compassion, care, interest, excitement. Um, these are like the emotional is like probably the first bridge and the most important bridge that we keep supporting and like, checking that the infrastructure is there. Is the emotional infrastructure there? Like when a marriage starts to get distant, intimacy has usually faded away because people have taken their emotions into their separate corners. They don't feel comfortable being emotional with each other. And so they just kind of retreat and coexist, and the relationship is there, but it's not very rich. So, in that way, I think a lot of the cups are talking about relationships, but they're also talking about our relationship with ourselves, which is true of all the cards. And then the other suits, like with swords, that's the card of like your thoughts and your communication. Those are very important in relationships. The wands are your vitality and your adventure and your life force. And that can also influence your relationships. And the pentacles are like resources, survival. Those can be part of like our relationships too. But perhaps, yes, I would say yes with some caveats and not exclusively. With Two of Cups, how do you gain clarity in your readings with clients, whether it pertains to themselves or a relationship or friendship? Do you look to the other cards to help you in that choice? Yeah, so good question. It depends a little bit. I'm always talking with someone before we get cards pulled. I'm saying, like, what's on your mind? What's the thing that's like your brain is still trying to sort out? What keeps you up at night? What preoccupies you? So if someone is focused on, I've been single for a while, I really want to date again, or I'm in a relationship, but it's feeling kind of stagnant, a little bit frustrated. So if relationship has come into the setting already, then I will probably focus on the relationship with other. If we're talking about a kind of problem where the person may need to like shift their thinking or become aware of their feelings, or it sounds like they're being really hard on themselves, then I might read the card like, yeah, let's talk about how you love yourself. How do you talk to yourself? How do you see and accept yourself? How can you create a dignified relationship with yourself instead of like being at war inside? So it's a lot of what's coming from the conversation, but also even once the card comes, I might read it one way and the person's looking a little bit puzzled, especially when I started reading cards. And then I'll say, okay, like, is this resonating for you? And they'll say yes or no. And then I can kind of shift and sort of offer a different point of view. So you also don't have to get it right the first time. And there's not necessarily a right answer. It's an answer that will speak to the person. Also, yeah, good question. I'm always relieved when Three of Cups appears. Giddy feelings. I wonder about it in relationship to relationship triangles. Is it generally interpreted in a positive way? I would think so. That's probably how I would read it. However, it could be that like the card just wants you to like start talking about, is there a threesome somewhere in this situation in your life? Is it harmonious? Is it troublesome? So it may just like be calling your eye to a triad of some kind where you can do more investigation. If it were reversed, then I would definitely maybe think about, yeah, is there some kind of conflict or issue in a triangulated dynamic? That's a good question. With the Two of Cups, I've had it read as a reference to my connection to my art and the beautifully rewarding reciprocity that it can give me when I take care of it. I love that. That is really beautiful. Yeah, so anything that provides this rich experience for you that helps you nourish yourself and express yourself and know yourself, that has a lot of kind of like loving connection in it. And a lot of people will call a lot of attention to creativity in the cups, also in the wands with the fire. So creativity can show up really in any of the suits, but yeah, water and fire definitely probably more people would go to creativity with those than the others. Okay, let's continue on. So now we're getting into expansion, expanding our capacity to hold emotion and to decipher it. So, Four of Cups. Can we feel into our own sense of what constitutes enough? One sec. This card, a lot of people will kind of go to boredom, complacency, because you see this figure who's being offered something that looks rather nice. And he's like, meh, not interested, or not even like going to look at it. So it also has a kind of like Siddhartha quality, like sitting under the tree. There's a meditative situation. However, the arms are crossed over the chest, which is also often a sign that like the heart is blocked. It's not, I don't know, that's splitting hairs. I don't need to go there. But I like to read this card as a question around your own ability to read your inner cues and take that as guidance when you determine how much of something you're allowing into your zone. So, one kind of story I tell with this is like, you're at the bar, it's a Tuesday happy hour, let's say, early in the week, and you have 3 more days of work you have to get up for. Everyone's had 3 drinks, and like, the person who likes to drink all the drinks is like, let's have another round. And you're like, I'm kind of tired. I feel like I've had enough. A lot of other people are sort of like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Crazy. It's Taco Tuesday. I don't know. But you are just really not feeling that 4th drink. So instead of just like being sort of pushed and like rushed into this next round with everyone else, you are listening to your body. You're listening to what you want and need, which is rest, water, nourishment, rather than more alcohol. And so you say, no, thanks. I'm good. Actually, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. This was awesome. Good night. And if anyone is like, oh, you're not elite, like you're like, no, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks. I love you. Bye. So rather than being like, oh, I don't want to like make them feel like I'm not fun. You're listening to you. So you check first internally. It's kind of like checking your gas gauge. How full am I already? And do I really want to accept more of this? You could take this also with like anything. It doesn't have to be alcohol. More work. Oh, hey, you are really good at this. Could you also pick up this other task that we need you to do? It could be food and how you eat beyond fullness. It could be exercise. Your body's like, hey, you need some rest. But you're like, I got to train for this marathon. Doesn't matter. So when we override what our body and our heart are really saying to us about like, hey, we're full, we're satisfied, we got what we need. It could be money too. It could be whatever. And really letting yourself inwardly determine how satisfied you are and whether or not you actually want what's being offered. So you honor yourself first. You do not, this is a way of escaping and changing people pleasing behaviors, which again, many women learn very early. And when you practice this, you really start to get a clearer sense of your emotional map because of the world we're socialized in. And because that world wants us to basically suppress, contain, and avoid or like not speak to a lot of feelings that we have. we have a hard time knowing what our feelings even are, which feeling we're having, why we're having it, and what we should even do about it. So we tend to like override, ignore, just keep going, just power through it, just like be fine, when like you're not fine. You're having a strong feeling. So when you start to do this, you really get into a practice of being like, what am I feeling? Where is the feeling in my body? When I feel sad, what does my body feel like? When I feel angry, where does that show up in my body? So you start to learn your emotional landscape and the map of your emotions. And that's incredibly powerful and helpful. Um, Love these notes on Four of Cups. This one brings up a physical feeling for me, grumpy, dirt in my eyes, but I wanted to type eyes in my dirt. That's funny. Eyes adjusted to the dark, but not seeing all the help. Silhouettes, silliness, a good antidote. Okay. Yeah, there's this. This is one of those cards that I think is hard to read. Um, I think all of those other interpretations or possibilities are like valid and good. There is kind of a grumpy look, especially in the modern. If you look at the modern witch version, there's a little more grumpy tude in that one. Um, yeah, and maybe there's something about not being willing to see what's in front of you, missing out on an opportunity. So these two things are kind of like going in opposite directions of each other. And one may be true in one reading, and one may be true in the other. The person you're reading for, or you, if you're reading for yourself, will know better, and you can explore that. I like this interpretation because, generally speaking, this lesson or this question of like, what is enough is relevant to everyone. And I don't say that because like I'm trying to play the game where I'm like, I got things that are like relevant to everybody. And like, I'm just trying to like trick them into like having a meaningful experience. But I have generally found that like this interpretation resonates, but you bring, yes, maybe it is complacency, maybe it's boredom, maybe it's like this grumpiness that creates a negative attitude where you can't see, you kind of have blinders on. Because there is something rather spiritual about this cup that's being offered. It's coming from a cloud. It's not coming from like the drunk guy at the bar. And so, yeah, definitely allow all of those to exist on a spectrum, or use the ones that feel like they just they work best for you. Thank you for that, Samar. Okay, now we have Five of Cups. We have this figure who has three broken or spilled cups in front of them at their feet, and two cups that are still whole, looking good, standing up, holding water behind them. The person is focused on what's broken, what's gone wrong, what isn't working. And if they, the way the figure is oriented here, it looks like they could see the bridge, but in the Smith Rider Waite version, the person's angled a little bit differently, slightly, or the bridge is slightly in a different place. So it's like if they would look up from what's broken, what's not working, and then turn behind them to see the cups that are still standing, still available, they would also notice this bridge in the distance that leads to some kind of community where there might be support, safety, nourishment. And so also because the person's wearing this darkened black, in the other card it's a black cape, this suggestion of grief, loss. And so all of the fives in all four suits have a kind of like difficulty in them. When we get to the five, things start getting a little challenging in some way. And so this one is where the harder side of emotion comes in, those emotions that make us feel alone, isolated, or at a loss, disappointed, frustrated. So, how do we move through grief and disappointment? Will we stay focused on what has been lost, what isn't working, or will we take a breath? Will we look up? Will we find something hopeful that allows us to hold a little bit of levity, even while we still process these feelings of loss and disappointment. Um, in every card, there's a lesson that can help us grow, evolve, heal, feel better, be better. And in every card, there's also a caution. So the caution with this card is that you focus on your pain and grief or loss so much that it really becomes pretty consuming, and you've actually started to like merge your identity with your own sense of loss. And the more that happens, the harder it becomes to like shift back toward hope. So we also want to, we want people to honor their grief. Grief comes when it comes. We cannot control that. We cannot effectively manage it. It's very powerful. And we want people to honor whatever sense of loss or disappointment they're feeling, but then also find the way out eventually, or find pathways that give us a sense of release or relief from the heaviness of this feeling. So, can we choose while we're in a state of grief or disappointment, or after we've honored it for a time, to start allowing hope and levity to enter, beginning to return to community, perhaps? Okay, and then Six of Cups. This is one of my favorite cards. Um, to me, it kind of represents the way that humans can save the planet and save each other and have a better social order. Um, a lot of people read this card as just like nostalgia, like, oh, you're stuck in the past, you're idealizing what happened long ago, you're living back there when you need to like get into the present. And that's available, that's a meaning that may be relevant. um, I used that meaning for a while and really have come to this card. The meaning of this card is one of like mutual aid, emotional abundance, building community through care. You see the two children here. Like all of the cups are growing these white flowers. There's like a village in the background that looks safe and warm and spacious. It's hard to really tell like who's giving and who's receiving the flower, kind of because it doesn't matter, because in this community, everyone gets what they need. People are constantly giving and constantly receiving. And that's how the community survives and thrives and experiences this kind of abundance. So when I see this card, I'm usually asking, like, similar to Three of Cups, but a little more expanded and more inclusive of perhaps more people or more communities. Like, who is your community? What communities are you in? How are you showing up? Are you giving and are you receiving? What kind of community do you want to be cultivating? And do you know people or know communities that are doing the things that reflect your values and the things you care about? Um, we also live in a world where like independence and like do it yourself and like everyone has their own of everything. We all have our own car and our own house and like our own refrigerator and our own like sets of toys and blah blah blah, and it's like excess, right? When if we still, I'm not saying, we all know that like communes and utopias usually fall apart in some way or another, but that doesn't mean they can never work. So what would it be like to share more and to think about like possessions not fully as like belonging to us, but as belonging to a community? And you could bring this into like a creative community or a social justice community or a work community, if that's relevant. Okay. So there's another three. What questions do you have about these cards? Any meanings, stories, connections you would like to share? Mm. With the Five of Cups, is there a reason three cups are shattered and two are left standing? Does that correlate with the two slash like the Two of Cups or the Three of Cups cards at all? That's interesting. My interpretation of why 3 are broken and 2 are standing is that it's almost an even split. Like you can't, I mean, you can split 5 and a half and make 2 and a half, right? But with an object, like there's one or the other. So with 3 spilled or broken, the argument that the person in the card can make is like the majority of my cups got broken and spilled, and I'm at a loss. I'm sad about this. But the 2 cups, like if that person were to get up and start walking and it was important that they had cups, they have 2 hands and 2 cups. So they have what they need in this kind of like metaphorical analogy where like a cup is something essential to your survival or something. So that kind of equation is like they're really focused on the fact that most has gone wrong, even though there's still plenty that's intact and whole. Whether they correlate with the 3 and the 2 of cups, I had not thought about that. So if you see a connection there, or if there is like a logic or correlation that really works, then definitely bring that in. My deck is a wildlife deck, but my 6 of cups is just a seascape. It seems like a strange representation of the card. Yeah, that is a kind of, you know, like that's like one symbol for you as far, I mean, I don't know like what else is in the seascape. If there are animals in the seascape and they're all like hanging out and like having fun, that has some 6 of cups vibes. But if it's just like a beach and some water, I guess we might take that as like the raw material of emotion, just like the big ocean. What do we do with all this emotional energy? Do we want to use it to like hurt each other and make each other feel bad? Or do we want to use it to build something beautiful and sustaining? That's one thing that's coming to mind for me there. That explanation of 6 of cups was much more clear than others I've read or heard. Thank you. Yeah, no animals in the seascape. Okay, that is a little weird. Um, yeah, yeah, I would say like we got all this ocean, we got all these emotions. How are we going to use it? It's kind of like even what we do with water. Like, how do we use our water? Are we watering our lawns on an August day when like most of it's evaporating before it hits the ground? Or are we like, I'm going to grow native plants that I don't really need to water so we can all have water for a long time? That might be a story I would make up for that card. Anything else? This kind of communal 6 of cups card for me, especially as someone who cares about community building, when I see it now, it's just so sweet to me. It's like there is community. This is a value you care about. Like keep leaning into it. So yeah, I really love that more than just like, oh, you're stuck in the past. Okay, we're getting into the 7, the 8, and the 9. Check how long it's been. Okay, making good time. So we're going to get into a little more challenge and discernment, and starting to learn how to listen to the heart and allow it to guide us. Oh, Becky is saying, I've always heard the 6 of Cups as an inner child reading, which I find to be super annoying. But do you see it as, do our memories help us or harm us in a reading? So I think inner child stuff is actually kind of rich. There's a lot there, but yes, I can see why the eye roll would come forward when people say that. I almost feel if you take the 2 of Cups, where it's the self meeting the self, I feel like sometimes that is inner child work, where it's like, oh, I've realized that when I was young, um, I didn't have kids to play with and I was isolated a lot. So I learned how to like read books to escape and like just hold my emotions and just like watch things happen. And so now as an adult, I'm kind of shy and I don't know how to relate to people. And it makes me feel like really incapable as an adult human that I can't do these things. So in Two of Cups, it would be like, I want to go back to that young version of me. And I would be like, hey, babe, that really sucked that you didn't have like playmates. So that, and kind of giving that love, you can still have relationships with people. You deserved to have like more attention paid to you, that kind of thing. So that one kind of reminds me more of inner child work. Um, I do think you could bring that into Six of Cups, especially if you're seeing kids in the card. But because there's two people and there's this exchange, it does really speak to me in terms of community. What do you see? Oh, but you asked about our memories as helping or harming us. I do think that's a good question. Like if we're stuck on, this is where you can take the nostalgia thing and expand it into something richer. Like, are you holding on to memories of a relationship that's no longer viable or no longer part of your life? And you're just like holding on and thinking about it and reliving the memories and what went wrong. And like, oh, this person was so amazing and I'll never find another person again. And those kinds of memories definitely will hold you back. But if you're going back in time to like find a memory, or a memory has shown up that you haven't thought about in a long time, you can start asking some questions like what in that memory seems relevant to what's happening to me now, and then you could have some interesting things happen for yourself. I think of Six of Cups as also as engaging with the world with an open heart, like a child. That's the inner child connection that works for me personally. Cool. Yeah, I like that. That kind of reminds me of the sun, where you also see a child like flinging his arms open and he's naked. He's like, I don't care. I'm having fun. Like I'm shining my light. Society has not corrupted me yet. And that kind of like carefreeness in the sun. But I think that's a beautiful way to see the Six of Cups too. And there are like Two of Cups and the Lovers, for example, have very similar energy. So as you start to learn the cards, you'll also notice that like a couple of them have a real strong connection or relation to each other. And you can kind of discern how they're slightly different, but in a Venn diagram way, they may have a lot of overlap. And Six of Cups and the Sun could be potentially two of those. Okay, I'm gonna enjoy another sip of my coffee. And then we'll move on. Okay. Learning how to follow the heart. So we started with like just having feelings, starting to notice them, questioning whether we indulge them too deeply or not. And now we're going to get into some like higher level emotional awareness, maturity, intellect, etc. Seven of Cups shows a figure with their back facing to us, and in front of them is a cloud with these seven cups that all have a different something floating inside them. And the figure is kind of in awe of all of these options and all of these possibilities. And a question we can ask with this card is how should say how do we know what to choose when the options are hard to name? So yes, I will come back to that somewhere. Thank you. So you have one cup with money. You have one cup with like a winged heart. You have a cup with a viper. You have a cup with a rose. You have a cup with this blue fist, a tornado. And so all of these different paths are possible. And it's kind of like overwhelming to really think about like, how do I even sort through what's on this menu, especially when they're all like floating in a cloud and maybe not even still totally in focus. There's also the suggestion that sometimes what you see in the card may be illusory, like, or in one of the cups, like like the option may appear to be this, but as you get closer or move into the option, it may turn out to be something different. So this can be like being overwhelmed by your options, being overwhelmed by the choices in front of you. We also get really frustrated when we don't know how to choose. And we are taught that like we should just be able to like make a decision, and we should like know what the decision should be. It should be very logical, it should be very simple. You just like choose and keep going. And there's like being confused is for the weak or the feeble-minded or people who don't know themselves. But we all get confused, we all get overwhelmed by options. We are always, all of us are at some point in a place where we don't know what's right for us right at that moment. And I have started to tell people like confusion and uncertainty are the thing that show us what, that's how we get to clarity. You have to be confused first before you get clear. So we get really frustrated with ourselves, like, why don't I know? Why don't I know what's wrong with me? I can't choose. I can't like figure out from what's in front of me, like what I should be doing. But this is a card where it's like, maybe it's okay to just not know right now. Maybe the options aren't actually in focus. So you shouldn't be choosing because it's not a good time. You don't have the information you need. It's okay to just like wait and see and feel into the different options and kind of watch them, see which ones are really sticking around in a few weeks and a few months, and see how you feel about them. In the Smith Rider-Waite, one of the cups has a figure that's like, it's like a little bitty ghost. It looks like a thing with a handkerchief over it. And this one is supposed to represent the spirit, kind of in disguise. It's like the option that is the most spiritual, is the most like deeply connected to your soul, but you can't even fully see it because it's like wrapped in some kind of like covering. And so the heart is supposed to be able to kind of like draw you to that spiritual choice, whatever it might be. But we need to take time, usually because we're always making decisions with our brains, to feel into like, what is a spiritually aligned choice for me? What do I actually desire? And will this option bring me that fulfillment? So it's kind of looking for that sacred option and learning to use your heart as a guide. This is, we're kind of getting deeper into that, like Four of Cups was starting to show us how we like gauge whether we have enough or not enough. This one's getting into like in a world of many options, how do we go into the heart and know what it's trying to lead us toward? Let's see. Mary Greer, who is someone who's written very much about tarot, very beautifully, offers a good Seven of Cups affirmation. I acknowledge my fantasies, yet ask the universe to provide for my needs. The thing I got most in trouble for in early elementary school was daydreaming. Always curious what's useful, roaming, what's harmful, escape. Yes, we do not get rewarded for daydreaming, unfortunately. And this brings me to like a conversation I had with a client recently about like being in the flow of your writing, where you feel really connected, you feel like you're channeling things, and then like something happens and you're out of a flow and you're like looking around. Maybe it's a noise, maybe it's like someone coming in your office to talk to you, whatever the case may be. But sometimes, and so we're like, how do I stay in the flow as long as possible? And you know, one thing I was like thinking and offering was like, sometimes it's okay to just like look up, look around, look out the window, watch the birds, daydream for a minute, and then come back. Like you might be sorting something out. So what you said, Samar, kind of reminds me of that. I see you're also calling attention to this other meaning in the card where like, oh, you're living an illusion. You're like fantasizing about what's possible and you're being very unrealistic. And I think that's probably sometimes valid. But that notion of like connecting to what the heart wants rather than what like your scarcity mindset wants, or what your like unhealed inner child wants, and coming into like the heart space as a guide kind of cuts through illusion anyway. So thank you for adding that, because that is something that people bring forward with this card. Okay, Eight of Cups. I love this card too. This is like a really powerful card to be in and to be using. How do we know when to walk away? According to our own soul wisdom. So here you see a figure. First, we see the 8 cups in the foreground. They look great. These are like really nice cups. There's a lot of them. There's 8 cups. That person in 5 of cups would like kill to have these 8 cups. And yet this person is like, I'm moving on. It's a dark night. This eclipsed moon is showing and looking down. In the Smith Rider-Waite version, the moon has a face that's kind of like slightly benevolently looking down on this person, offering some light and guidance. And then the person is traveling upward in this rocky terrain. So a story I like to tell with this card is like, you know, are you, or I would say, I would assume, or I would conjecture, you're in a situation that maybe you've been in for a while. You came here to learn some things and to grow, and you've learned those things and you've grown a lot. And the situation is no longer able to expand to hold your next expansion. So, like, you're not looking at a dumpster fire of a situation. It's not that bad. People outside of you might say, Cecily, why would you leave this? Like, let's say it's a job. You make good money, you have health insurance, you have like a really cool title, and this company seems really cool, and like the stuff you're doing seems really good. But I'm on the inside where I'm like, yeah, my team is like all kinds of whacked out. This is kind of a toxic work environment. No one's thinking about equity. No one's thinking about like justice. There's a lot of hypocrisy, and I've learned a lot of skills. I've done some new things. I got to have some really cool experiences. I met some really cool people, but I'm ready to grow in a different way. And this place isn't going to let me do that. So I keep traveling. So people around you are not going to be saying like, you need to get out of this situation. Like, you got to go. It's going to come from inside you first. And you're going to be like, everyone's going to wonder why I'm doing this. And then you do it anyway, because your wisdom is your greatest asset. So you get to decide when it's time to go. This is also like the person's moving upward. They're ready for this other challenge, a kind of like new spiritual path that will shape them and teach them new things. There's often a bittersweet, this is like a dark night of the soul kind of vibe. There's some bittersweetness in this card of having to walk away, because it wasn't like all entirely bad, and you got a lot out of it. And usually, like, once you leave, you're not going to come back. Like, you might see those friends, or you might like have some connection, but it's not going to be the same kind of thing. It's really like a chapter closing. So there's a bittersweet quality to this moving on. But the fact that you will have listened to your heart, figured out your own timing, walked away from something because it doesn't fully serve you, even though it seems good on paper, this is like huge spiritual magnification. Like, doing this is powerful work, and it always takes you into something that you're ready for, like your next evolution. I was pulling this card a lot when I was getting ready to leave a job that I'd been at for like 5 years or something. It was a small team. My boss was not going to like give me his position, which was like the only higher position I could have. And I was like, how old was I then? I was like 39 or something. And I was like, I mean, if I stay here for another 5 years, like, I'm 45 and I'm still like hitting this income wall and this like growth wall. So I love this job. I love what I do, but I've got to I got to keep growing. 9 of Cups. How do we manage our emotional bank account? How do we honor our emotional capacity? So here you have a figure who is they have 9 cups behind them in this very like lovely presentation, this kind of like exalted presentation with a nice drape cloth, and they're all like lined up, like, check out all my cups. I got all these cups, check me out. I don't think it's a super showy card. Some people will read this as a kind of like smugness, kind of like with 4 of Cups, where you're like, oh, this person thinks they're like too good for that cup, or this person is just showing off all the cups they've got and like they're self-righteous or something. But I think there's just kind of some genuine, authentic self-possession, maybe like a hint of swagger in here, but on the emotional level. So, one thing to think about, which I'll emphasize a little bit more in the meditation, is the numerical progression of the cards. So to kind of expand on that, just because you get a 6 of something doesn't mean like next you're supposed to get the 7, because you're like graduating linearly through all of the cards. But when you're getting toward like 9 and 10, you're getting to a culmination kind of place, like you're doing something with this element that is like has a finishing aspect, or a graduation aspect, or like a up leveling aspect. When you're at the beginning of the progression with the ace and the 2, there's a kind of like opening and a beginning and a starting to like explore and settle things. So that doesn't mean just because you got an ace, like you're a beginner and a novice and you don't know anything. And it doesn't mean because you get a 10 that you're some kind of expert. But the numbers will kind of show us where where we are in a cycle. And we can be like a 9 with something and an ace with another. Our lives are not linear. We do get 1 year older every year, and that's like the only really linear thing about it. But the rest of our evolution is very meandering, kind of spiralic. We'll have a situation come up in our lives that we think we resolved, and then 4 or 5 years later, we're in a new situation that feels exactly like that other one. And we're like, what's wrong with me? I thought I fixed this about myself. I thought I graduated out of this. But often our life's work is to repeat, to keep working on the same lesson, like the whole time, with a lot of different iterations and new levels of awareness, maturity, and intelligence. So we think like, oh, I jumped out of the line. I'm not moving forward. I'm moving backwards. But it's like, no, you just came back around in the orbit to revisit this issue, deepen your learning, and apply the stuff you learned the first time. Anyway, back to 9 of Cups. This card I associate with having sufficient experience that you've really developed a lot of emotional capacity, awareness, and maturity. This can come from just being in relationships, dealing with a lot of issues, healing your own emotional wounds, that kind of thing. So I see this as like a very emotionally capable person who can handle a difficult situation emotionally with awareness, maturity, and intelligence. So sometimes when this comes up in a reading, it's like maybe there's like friend drama or family drama or marital drama or something. And then you get 9 of Cups, and I'm like, you got this. Like, you've been training for this your whole life, all the situations you've been through, all the friendships that you have cultivated over long periods of time, like, have really made you fluent in how relationships get created and how you maintain them and how you honor yourself in relationships and how you honor other people. So you can handle this. Like, go into the vault, notice how much like booty you got, how much treasure and how much capital is in the bank account. And you can draw on that. Like, you have more than what you need to get through this. And then 10 of Cups, very lovely card. So the tens are these culminating numbers where we get to the end of this one part of the cycle. And you can think about the ace through the 10 as like, I think about it like the K through 12 years. So, or like K through college or something, where you're starting, there is some like beginner opening, getting into the space, learning. And then you've completed this major foundational learning. And 10 is this kind of like end of the chapter, a little bit of a graduation. And then the court cards that come next, the page, the knight, the queen, and the king, these are like graduate level courses where you take that foundational learning and you're going to go even deeper toward mastery. So here we are at this culminating space, the fullness of the cups, and you see this two women, two children outside. There's a rainbow out. The rainbow is holding all of these 10 cups. They're dancing, they're playing, they're flinging their arms open in appreciation of this beautiful thing in front of them. So we all know that rainbows are fleeting. They don't stay in the sky forever. So if we want to appreciate them, we have to like seize the moment and go out and look at them and marvel at them while they're there before they disappear. So this card is about having enough presence in your heart, having enough awareness of your emotional movements that you can cultivate for yourself joy, peace, and ease in an everyday situation. So I'm looking out my window right now and into my like front flower bed where there's a big stalk of sunflowers, and these goldfinches come and they like hang on all the branches, and they're kind of like upside down eating seeds out of this sunflower plant. And it's like gives me so much joy just to see them like hanging all over this sunflower plant. So it's a little bit of a miracle that I'm like making sentences while they're like doing all this cute stuff. That's an example of like, it's just it's some sunflowers and some birds, but wow, I really love it. It brings me a lot of pleasure. I could find that same pleasure perhaps in like having a cup of tea and sitting down to journal, or calling a friend, or if I could knit, maybe knitting for a while. So this is really like being able to be present with your heart, to find the goodness, the joy, the value in whatever is in front of you at the moment. We can't do this in every given situation, but we can build our capacity to take ourselves into this place more and more often. The more we do that, the more we practice presence. The more we practice presence, the more we can be emotionally aware. We can be present with the people who are in front of us. We're not like in our phones trying to like run away from our feelings. We're okay with just like being. We're like, being is good. I don't have to do a lot. I don't have to like perform. I don't have to take care of everyone to like have a purpose in this place. I can be and enjoy and find the beauty, and maybe even like point out the beauty for other people who are here. So moving to the end of your own rainbow, that's kind of like, what's your big dream? What's your pot of gold that's out there? Moving yourself in that direction, feeling the lightness of your heart, practicing presence, and being willing to find a better way, an easier path. Okay. We have 4 more to go after this. But what are you thinking about these cards? What questions do you have about these? Other readers suggest that since there is a hole between the top layer of cups, that it is leaving a space that if you need to return, there is a space left for you, like a safety net that some people may need to be able to listen to their heart and walk away. What are your thoughts for Eight of Cups? Let's go back. So you're talking about the space right here, leaving a space that if you need to return, there's a space for you, like a safety net. Yeah, I mean, I would say this is the space. Like, I'm not saying don't say that, or I'm not saying don't believe that. It doesn't satisfy me in my interpretation of this card because I think the work of this card is the walking away. That doesn't mean there's like never a tie or a connection, or there's no goodwill, or like everything is over and that's like it's all in a vault and like totally untouchable. Like, I don't think that. But I also, this isn't a card about going back. It's not about walking away and going back. It's about like finding the courage and listening to your heart in such a powerful way that you're like, you know what? If I can never come back, I have to be accepting and peaceful with that because I know that this is where I need to go. One way to maybe use that space to say, like, this is the space that you're going to leave behind. Like, your absence will be felt. You left your mark here. People will notice your absence. It's not like you'll be gone and you won't matter to anyone. But that's kind of how I see that. Let's see. And then for 10 of Cups, I think of that book, The Magic of Ordinary Days. I don't know that book. It sounds like a great title for this card. Christy, if there's anything you want to share about that, feel free to come off mute. Just that there is so much magic to be found in the ordinary. Absolutely. Is that the same Hallmark? Is that the same story Hallmark made into a movie? Christy says yes. Yeah. So, was the Magic of Ordinary Days like lots, like no paragraphs, like really long?
No, it's
Okay.
it's just it's just a kind of a sweet little book, but I just that title, like I just find so much truth in that. Like you said, your goldfinches. I have the same thing, eating my sunflower leaves, It's
Yes.
just those little oh moments.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think, I will say, the more you practice, the more you use tarot, the more you open yourself up to the possibility of magic, coincidence, things and energies beyond this like three-dimensional reality, the more magic you will find. And I don't care anymore if it's like real or not, because I don't think I use it to the point of delusion. I'm not like I have my sun, moon, and rising sign are all in earth. So I'm pretty practical, but that helps me stay grounded. And so but as I've like gotten into tarot and become more witchy and like been willing to believe and entertain that like magic is available and magic is all around us, the more of it I find, even in, like a real life bird eating, or a little flock of birds eating from the sunflowers. That's real, but I'm like, that's magic too. I'm just going to decide it's also magic. Okay. Anything else? All right. All right. Now we move into the mastery, where we apply the heart's challenges to higher understanding. So first we have the page. I really like this card. This is one of the cups cards that I do most associate with creativity. Um, excuse me. This coffee is giving me burps. Pardon me. The burps are magical. Uh, you have the figure very fancifully dressed, very like fun looking, with this like hat and this like scarf wrapped around him and these bright colors and boots. And he's got this cup and there's this fish popping out of it and they're looking at each other. So what I like to say about this card is that like here's this like young, curious, kind of like upstart whippersnapper type who's come upon this cup with a fish in it. And the fish is like popped out and the page is like, how about that? And he really wants to like know. He's like, here's a creature that's very different from me. I would really love to know what it's like to be a fish. What does this fish do all day? What does it eat? Who does it hang out with? What is its philosophy on life? Like, what are its goals in life? And really being super curious about the fish, even though there's not a lot of possibility for being able to communicate with the fish in a real way. So what does the heart desire to know? And what is heartfelt curiosity? So the journaling prompt for this one invites you. I have another client who pulled Page of Cups. Well, Page of Pentacles, actually. I think there's a lot of curiosity in the pages generally, like a readiness to like dive into something. And because they're kind of like, I mentioned the sort of academic comparison where pages are kind of like going to their like first day of grad school. They've learned enough to get into the program, but they still have like 3 years of learning, deep, intense learning, or 5, or whatever the case may be. So they're also a beginner in a new way. And curiosity is of greatest service to you in these situations. Anytime we decide, I know everything I need to know about this, like everything shuts down. There's no space for learning. And life is just more interesting if you're willing to like be learning your whole life or as long as you possibly can, right? So this is, but I was going to say that my client pulled the Page of Pentacles, which is also a curious beginner card. And in their reflections on the card, everything they wrote was a question. And I was like, perfect. That's what these cards are, is like questions, 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 big, powerful questions. What's it like to dream as a fish? And so the journaling prompt is like taking something that you're interested in recently, like maybe you want to learn a language, maybe you're starting to like study plants, and then asking some really like big, deep questions that are almost unanswerable. Like, what does it feel like for a flower to spend 3 months in the blazing sun? How do these goldfinches communicate with each other? Like, what are they saying? What are they talking about? And like, we can overly personify animals or plants or whatever, but we can also have fun really caring about their consciousness and like, how do they experience this life on this planet? So when we're in the space of big curiosity, that's also where creativity can enter. Because if we're like, I know how it's supposed to be, I know all I need to know, there's no space there. There's no like creative play in that. But when we open to curiosity, there's so much room for it. So desiring to know the unknowable, seeking connection with mystery, reclaiming curiosity and creativity, and moving toward emotional mastery. Part of what happens if we want to get like more in touch with our feelings is we need to stop judging them. Like, oh, I'm mad and I shouldn't be mad about this. And it's like, maybe you should be mad about it. Like maybe your anger has a lot of good information for you about what you need and what you don't want. But instead we're like, I shouldn't be angry. I'm a bad person for feeling angry about this. I'm such a bitch. And it's like, no, what if you got rid of the judgment and asked yourself, what is this anger about? Where do I feel it in my body? What if I let it stay with me? What if I think about a memory that I associate this feeling with? Like, what just happened in the present that has some echo from the past? And that curiosity is where mastery comes from, because we start then learning what the emotional map for us looks like and what kind of information our emotions can bring forward. Okay, the Knight of Cups. This is another really sweet card. I always get excited when I see this one. What's possible when we let the heart lead? So all knights are in motion. They are moving from point A to point B. They have a mission of some kind. So whatever foundational kind of knowledge the page has acquired is then put into practice by the knight, who will go out into the world and apply it somewhere. So the Knight of Swords, for example, moves really fast. Like, they've committed to an idea and they're just like running super high speed to go in hot pursuit of that. The Page of Pentacles is the slowest moving knight, the one that's very watchful and patient and studious. And this Knight of Cups is kind of in the middle. And you can see the horse is a little bit like fanciful. It's kind of doing not just like a functional run, it's like kind of like prancing a little bit. The rider has these wings on his helmet, kind of like Hermes or Mercury, the messenger, and holding the cup right in front as if it is the compass for the journey. So this is, to me, a card of following your heart. And this is really hard stuff too. Like, we see this a little bit in Eight of Cups, but the way that, we're kind of sold a particular model for progressing through life. Go to school, make good grades, get out of school, choose a career, do that, get into a relationship, procreate, work, retire, travel, whatever. All of those things are good. And like, no one's saying we should stop doing all of those things, but they're not what everyone particularly wants in that particular order. And it doesn't really allow for the kind of like meandering quality of life. So if we feel like we're not doing that stuff because we see it everywhere around us, we're like, oh, I'm a weirdo. I don't know how to live this like normal life that everyone else seems to be like enjoying. Something's wrong with me because I can't just like stay on that straight and narrow path. My heart is guiding me to like live out of a van for 6 months and then work for a little while at a like part-time job and then go to Europe and like study Polish or whatever. And like, we don't see a lot of models that are lifted up for the kind of like, oh, this person's following their heart. They're like going all over the place. And so this work of like figuring out what your heart wants and creating space in your life to give yourself that experience usually involves you encountering people who will question your choice. So are you sure you want to do that? Is that really safe? Do you have the money for that? That seems like kind of foolish. And so in order to like keep saying yes to what your heart wants when parents or friends or coworkers or whoever are questioning your choice, probably more because they're like, that seems fun, but like, I can't get away with that. So I'm a little bit jealous. It requires you to really be courageous and to really like affiliate and align with yourself in a really deep way. So following the path that you choose for yourself, possibly deviating from the norm, and really listening to your inner guide. And that takes work because no one's teaching us in school or usually in our house how to like find our inner guide and listen to it and ask what it's telling us. Okay, getting to the Master of the Masters, the Queen of Cups, and then the King. These two figures are usually talked about as though the queen is kind of an internal oriented figure and the king is externally oriented towards like leadership. I think that creates a segmentation gender wise that's false. Like men could be inward looking, women can be leaders. But we can work with these qualities or explore them and just know that like when you pull the King of Cups as a woman or female identifying person, femme identifying person, it's not necessarily like, it's not like reflecting a man in your life necessarily, nor is it reflecting like your masculine side. It's just giving you a reflection of like how you can apply some of this in different kinds of ways. So the Queen, as you'll see, has the most fanciful cup of all. It is so ornate, it's very large. She's sitting on this beautiful throne with this clamshell on top and these little cupids up above. And her cape has almost like a watery texture and quality to it. It's almost just as if she's blending into the ocean. And there are these like lovely sea stones at her feet. And the story or the idea is that like this cup is one that she crafted as a representation of her inner experience, as a reflection of her heart and its beauty, its exquisiteness, its complexity, and like this Queen is comfortable, fluent, capable, proficient, expert at being with her emotions. So she's like, all the emotions, I've felt them. Or if I haven't, I intend to. I'm open to that. Even the ones that are really difficult. Like, I want to know what this emotional experience of being human can contain. It's as big as the oceans on the planet, and all of it is like available inside of me. What a rich, powerful place. All this information and experience that colors the way that I live and informs my life. How amazing. So a willingness to be with your feelings rather than like suppressing them, numbing out, running away, denying them. And really, because of that, the more we learn about our own emotional space, the more we can pick up on the very subtle parts of other people's emotional affect. So whether it's just like reading the energy off a person or actually seeing their like expression and hearing through the words they're saying, not only does this develop a mastery internally, it also makes it possible to like be very astute in what's going on emotionally among other people in your presence. The Queen, I would also say, has the capacity to like take this emotional awareness and apply it to herself, but also to protect herself from taking on the emotions of other people. So if we get into like default modes of people pleasing, we've kind of like, I want to say like short sold, that's not the word I want. But if we're just in people pleasing mode, like we're in a kind of manipulation place where we're not letting our real feelings come out, and we're doing something to manage someone else's feelings about us. So Queen of Cups is not going to go there. She's about emotional honesty. And we can't, it's hard to execute every moment of every day, but it is her aspiration. Deeply feeling person, creative and nurturing without giving herself away or selling herself out. Okay, King of Cups. So this is the card from the Pagan Otherworlds deck. And what I love about this card is the way that he's touching his chest. He's like physically making contact with his heart space and like having this really like tender, inward looking disposition and facing again, like the Queen, like the vastness of the ocean. Every emotion that's out there or possible, this king can handle it, witness it, process it. And the question here is like, how does our emotional capacity and awareness serve others and ourselves? So what does emotional leadership look like? And that was like, that's the journaling question for this card. What is emotional, like if you were a role model for emotional leadership or emotional maturity, what would that actually look like in life? Um, First, like knowing the emotion, getting curious about the emotion, not reacting immediately from the emotion, but giving yourself time to feel it. And then, being aware of other people's emotions around you, not getting entangled in them, and creating space, like holding space, modeling what emotional communication looks like when you speak from the heart, whether it's like, I am so in love with you. You are so amazing. I don't want to control you or own you, but I just want to tell you, like, you are so just like badass. I love it. I love you. You're awesome. And like, we hold back from saying that stuff sometimes because we're like, oh, then they're going to think like I'm too needy. Or it's like, you know what? I've really been struggling. I've been like having a feeling that's really hard for me. And it came up because we were in this situation where you did this thing. And I know you weren't trying to hurt me, but it reminded me of this way that like my parents used to treat me. And it brought up all these feelings. And I just want to tell you about my experience with that. So you're aware of like what my emotional deal is. And I'm not blaming you. I'm not judging you. I just want to communicate my feelings so that there's more emotional information available between us. And I'm also really interested in your reaction to what I'm saying. So that's a kind of emotional communication that isn't like charged up and like needing people to do something or change something or apologize, but it has a lot of awareness in it and usefulness. But that's a kind of communication we also don't see modeled very much. So here he's really touching into the tenderness of his heart, this very like gentle strength about him, being able to communicate clearly and lovingly, whether the emotion is positive or difficult, um, holding space, like I said, for others without taking on or without trying to fix or commandeer, and holding space for yourself, really respecting the emotional um, aspects of who you are. Okay. You can see perhaps, like with some of these court cards for me initially were very difficult because there's not much story in them. Someone had to kind of like describe a story to start to notice in those cards, like with the fish in the page, for example. So there's some overlap in these court cards. Like the king and queen can have very similar aspects, and you could potentially read them as sort of the same thing, but there are some different details in each card that might draw your eye in a different direction. But yes, floor is open for your questions, meanings, stories, comments about these cards. Is that another Cupid in the Queen of Cups throne below her? What do you make of that child down there? Yeah, so we have these, what's the other word? A cherub, yes. So Cupids or cherubs, I want to go to like an inner child place with this. Honestly, I don't have a clear, strong answer for you or one that's like taught. And if anyone has read about like the representation of the children, feel free to share that. I do feel like that clamshell at the top is kind of like the clamshell from which Venus emerges. We associate her with like beauty, pleasure, joy. And these cherubs kind of represent to me a little bit of like innocence, sweetness, coming back. When we're young and small like that, we just have like raw feelings and we don't have a lot of language for them. So there's one way to read it as a kind of like connection across a timeline from the very like initial way that we experience emotion as very young people and the way we can harness that in a more aware way, even though the emotions are actually raw a lot of the time. But I'm totally making that up. I just made that up right now. So we can look into that. You can make up another version. What else are y'all noticing, wondering about, anything that's unclear? Okay, we have a few minutes. So I thought we would do just a little tarot pull together. And if you have your cups cards around and pulled out of your deck, I would encourage you to go through and pick a card that still feels kind of like that you're not fully connected with yet, but you still want to get to know better, that still holds some greater mystery for you, or one that challenges you in some way. And when you've chosen that card, I would love for you to put it in the chat. Yes, choose just from your cups cards. One of the cups we talked about tonight that feels like still a little mysterious or challenging to you in terms of what it means. We have Knight of Cups, 6, 4, 9, Page, also the 9, Queen, the 8. 8 showing up for Carrie, stalking you, and the 4, the Knight. Okay. Cool. Keep them coming. Take the card that you've selected and like leave it out, and then shuffle the rest of the cups back into your deck. So mix them back in. Get them all shuffled. Take a look at the cups card you selected, and I invite you to hold this question as you sort through the rest of the deck to pull another card. So okay, so what personal connection do I have to this card right now? So it's like, hey, card, you're interesting but mysterious to me. I would love, tarot, for you to show me what this card has to do with me in my life at this time. What's one way that I can personally connect to this card? And then pull 1. When you have that other card, I would love for you to, again, type the card that you picked to get curious about, plus the card that you drew in that order. And we'll kind of workshop those a little bit. Okay. Cool. Okay. Oh Oh my gosh, Beth, that is hilarious. Amy chose King of Cups and drew Knight of Cups and says, I must not have shuffled well. The cards give you what they give you. Okay, let's see. I want to bring someone on to talk about what they got. So take a second to develop a hypothesis for what these two cards are saying to you. Like, oh, I think this card I pulled is showing me that Four of Cups for me means this. Like, develop some kind of hypothesis. Even if you're not sure about it, that's fine. That's why it's a hypothesis. And if you want to come on and like talk about what you're seeing and hear some of my feedback, give me a +1 in the chat. Okay, I give it a second. All right, oh, that's a +1. Okay.
Cecily, could you repeat that one more time?
Repeat the instructions?
Yes.
Okay. So if I want you to develop a hypothesis for what like the card pull is saying to you about the first card. And when you have that, and you do want to come on and like talk about what you got, then put a +1 in the chat. And not everyone needs to like have that desire, but let's go with Mary. And okay, yeah, Mary, you chose the Knight of Cups to connect with, and then you pulled the Empress for how it connects with your life. So Mary, why don't you come on and tell me what you think this means to you?
Yeah, so I know the Nine of Cups is centered around creativity, and that's something that I've really not felt in touch with lately. And for some reason, I just felt really compelled to get clarity around this. And when I think of the Empress, I think of someone that is in power of their creativity, that knows who they are, that is unapologetically themselves. And I just feel like maybe that's something that's missing right now, or I don't have the confidence in my creativity right now. And it's there. I just don't believe in myself enough right now.
Yeah. So, and you're connecting Knight of Cups with your creativity. And I think like, yeah, there's a way to always kind of read it in that vein, to kind of lean on my own tendency with this card is that like following your heart. So if you chose Knight of Cups to like explore, I feel like you're inherently asking like, what is my heart, where is my heart wanting to take me? And then you get the Empress, who is like creativity writ large. And so like the story you're coming up with combined, I would totally agree with. Like, the Empress is unapologetic. She lets herself indulge her passions. She lets herself play. She lets herself like meander and kind of be non sequential about things, like the way that nature works. Like nature has an order, but it's also wild and like a little, it's not as tidy as we try to keep our homes. It has its own wild kind of logic, and the Empress embodies that in a creative capacity. So yeah, you may be very like caught up in your brain about like what you should be doing or how you should be doing it, and your heart is like, just create, Mary. Like, just go be creative, just go like play and mess around and like let yourself be like wild and weird. So I definitely see that message in there for you.
That makes so much sense. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Let's do another one. Yeah. One second. Okay, Lisa, let's talk about yours. You focused on the Four of Cups and then you pulled the Eight of Pentacles. So tell me your hypothesis.
Well, since the Four of Cups, I was a little confused about. It was interesting to me to pull the Eight of Pentacles because, I mean, I see it as sort of work, or, you know, sort of workmanship, and sort of focusing on industry and work. And I think I had never thought of the Four of Cups, how you presented it, as, you know, what is enough and what are the boundaries. And I feel like this summer, both my kids are home. One's home from college and one's going into high school. And I had been hoping to do some writing, and I just haven't been able to do any writing. And I'm really struggling with my relationship to writing and to that aspect of my work, how much I want to do, how content or discontented I feel with that my creative life, which has really kind of gone quiet because of my caretaking role. And so I guess I feel like that makes sense to me. The second card made sense to me as about just a current struggle in the moment, that I'm trying to define some of the boundaries and what's enough on each level of caretaking versus creative work, etc. So it felt like it was illuminative for me.
Good. Yeah, the Eight of Pentacles will show usually someone at a workbench kind of like hammering out these 8 pentacles. And the notion there is that like you're getting better at your craft through repetition and practice and just like repeated attention to something. So if 8 of Pentacles is like talking to you about 4 of Cups, I do see that saying like you're working to develop your mastery of this 4 of Cups discernment. So there may be a way that you're like I wanted to say over parenting, but like, I don't even know that I know what that means, but like kind of this came up at the very beginning, but I think before we started the recording, it's like, sometimes the people in our lives are actually more capable of like doing things than we want to believe. And we sort of like rush in to like do or help instead of being like, maybe they can figure this out, or maybe they can mess up and then figure it out. And I can actually just like toss in a little bit of wisdom and they'll like, you know, figure out what they need to do. So it could sometimes, if we want to be working or writing, but something is like getting in the way of us like really diving into that, we'll find distractions for ourselves and reasons to be spending our time doing something else. Like, these people need me. I need to be doing this. I need to be caring for this. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but there is like, you know, if people were 20%, 15% more capable of doing the things that you're helping them with, you could scale back that 15% and put that energy into the things you wanted. So it's not an all or nothing proposition. It's about like, how do I scale back a little bit, or like, where is the line for me? And feel free to correct me if I've made wrong assumptions. But I do see those two cards, what you described as very
Oh,
smart.
makes total sense to me. It's spot on. Yeah.
Okay. All right, we are getting to the end of time. We can either do one more or wrap up. If you want to take a quick poll in the chat, tell me what you want. Let me get us to this last slide. Bam. Okay. So as I said, at the tomorrow sometime, you should be receiving the recording of this class. You'll receive a PDF of the presentation, so you have a really quick reference of some of the like keywords and themes that were presented here. You'll receive another PDF with the journaling prompts That also has some tarot spreads that help you go deeper into some of the cards. And then, oh yeah, so I'm going through these suits like one by one. We did the swords last month. And if you are a member, you can just get that class. It's in Patreon. You can get all the stuff from that class. It's structured very much like this one. Next, we will do fire. We're moving from swords, the way our thoughts work, then to the cups, the way our feelings work, because our thoughts create our feelings, and then our feelings create our actions, which are the wands, and then our actions produce our results. Those are the pentacles, and then we'll get into the major arcana. So we're kind of taking them chunk by chunk with like a month, 6 weeks in between, so you have time to digest. If you're not a member and you're like paying for these individual classes, and you do them all, I'm going to give you $50 just for like completing. And also if you do them all, I'm going to give you, and you let me know that, you have to like reach out and be like, hey, I did it. Then we'll set up a 90-minute coaching session if you want, where we just focus on your tarot practice. And, you know, I heard some people sharing some challenges they're having creatively. And I just want to remind you that I'm a creative coach who would love to help you with those challenges. And I think I have a couple clients on this call tonight. No pressure, but we're having a really good time working together, I think. So just keep that in mind. I'm here for you. I would love to support you. I will stop the recording and bring us back together. And then if there are any final questions, I will answer those. Thank you all for watching and being with me and all of us. I stopped the share, but not the recording. Stop recording. Okay.